Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to a special Saturday Watchman Newscast live stream. As I've told you over the past week, we are coming to you every single day live as this war continues to rage with Israel, according to the Israel Defense Forces, prepared to invade Gaza by, quote, air, land, and sea. That's the IDF saying that, folks. So at any minute now, I'm coming to you 4 p.m. Eastern time here on the east coast of the United States, but at any minute now, Israel could go in again by air, land, and sea. And over the past 48 hours, Israeli commandos have been going into Gaza, in particular in Gaza City, and they've killed some terrorist cells there, and they've also gained clues about the hostages. Remember, over 150, most likely at least 150 hostages, including some U.S. citizens, I'm an American, of course, still held in Hamas's clutches, with Hamas threatening, number one, to use them as human shields, and number two, threatening to murder them on camera as Israel advances into Gaza. And folks, like all of you, I'm sure, like most, I hope, who are watching right now, I've been praying around the clock. I haven't slept much over the past week, surprise, surprise, but in all honesty, I've been praying around the clock for those hostages. And this morning I was praying, and I think God impressed something on my heart. It struck me. Genesis 14. Go and check it out. If you got your Bible nearby, or your phone, or after we're done with the live stream, we're going for at least 30 minutes here. Genesis 14 recounts the story of how Abraham, who was then still known as Abram, went and rescued his nephew Lot, who had been taken hostage by pagan Canaanite tribes. Remember, Abraham grabbed 318 men, that was all, and went and fought against those Canaanite tribes and kings and got his nephew Lot back, who was a hostage, got Lot and Lot's company back. I just thought of that this morning, and I'm thinking of that right now. Look, it was tall odds that Abraham was up against, no doubt. And clearly right now, it looks like long odds for those hostages in the bowels of hell in some Hamas tunnel. I'm sad to say, most likely. And yet, God has his ways. And I believe God will go ahead of the Israel Defense Forces right now. And I pray for an Abraham Lot type miracle, a Genesis 14 miracle. I'm praying right now for those hostages, and I hope you can join me in that prayer. I hope that I come to you over the next few days reporting miraculous stories of how the hostages, which include the elderly, Holocaust survivors, little babies whose parents were slaughtered, and then the babies and toddlers were dragged back to Gaza. By the way, if there's still doubts about that from the pro-Hamas activists right here in America and around the world, well, yesterday on social media, Hamas themselves on their own social media accounts posted footage of Hamas terrorists holding Israeli babies whose parents presumably were slaughtered 1 week ago today. Hard to believe, folks, the week that changed everything for Israel. Things will never be the same in Israel, in Gaza, in the Middle East, in my life, and whether you know it or not, very likely in your life, because Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed that this war is going to change the Middle East for generations. What does that mean? That doesn't just mean crushing Gaza or crushing Hamas, not Gaza, crushing Hamas in Gaza and eliminating Hamas as a threat to Israel once and for all. That doesn't change the entire region. That changes Israel's immediate neighborhood, yes, but it doesn't change the entire region for generations. Changing the entire region for generations, that entails crushing Hezbollah and taking the fight straight to the head of the snake, the Iranian regime. Now, I'm not saying Israel directly would strike Iran. We don't know, but I can tell you, and we've reported this extensively on the newscast over the past few years, that Israel indirectly, through sabotage, through targeted killings of Iranian officials, has indeed made the Iranian regime pay a price for its continued support and sponsorship of terror around the region. And hey, we're getting right into it here, right? But welcome. Let me catch my breath and say welcome to everyone. We've got thousands with us now. Before we're done, we'll have many thousands more from around the world joining us right now for the inside story of what is happening right now in Israel, in Gaza, and why it affects you no matter where you live. If you've missed any of our coverage here, daily live streams, check them out in our archives under newscast. While you're at it, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We're not only posting the newscast live streams, we're posting other content here on the channel as well for such a time as this. We were born for this. This is what we do. I like to joke around with my wife and say, man, I can't change a light bulb, but there's two things I can do. I can talk, I can communicate, and I can shoot a basketball. Used to be able to shoot a basketball pretty well, but I'm getting kind of old, but I can still, God has given me the ability to communicate to you what is going on and hopefully to make sense of it all, help make sense of it all in these Bible prophetic times in which we are living right now. By the way, I can change a light bulb. I was just kidding, but I'm not the handiest guy in all seriousness. But I say Bible times, and I began this newscast, if you didn't catch the top, of recounting the story of Genesis 14 with Abraham saving the hostage Lot. His nephew was held captive, and that's our prayer for these Israeli hostages, a Genesis 14 outcome. But some people might be watching and saying, oh man, I came here for the news, and this guy is religious, quote unquote. First of all, I'm not religious, but there is another R I ascribe to, and that is relationship with the Lord Jesus. And this is a channel, yes, indeed, it is news from a biblical perspective, unapologetically, because at the end of the day, hey, look, I was on Fox News the other night, didn't mention the Bible at all, didn't mention anything spiritual, just gave just the facts, ma'am, just straight analysis. I've done that many times and continue to do it in my role. But at the end of the day, folks, you cannot separate what's going on right now from the spiritual. At its root, this goes beyond the physical with bloodthirsty Hamas terrorists slaughtering Israel, Israel with a counterattack, Iran pulling the strings. Beneath that, it is a spiritual struggle. There's no gray areas here. This is quite literally good versus evil. And right now, everyone is pretty much choosing which side they stand on. And if they haven't yet, and people think they can sit on the fence and sit this one out, you're sadly mistaken, because here in the United States, and in a minute, by the way, I'll give you an update on the Israeli operation, but I want to get this out of the way real quick. Here in the United States, where I'm sitting right now, we certainly have people picking a side on U.S. college campuses nationwide, and they're picking the wrong side. College campuses in the United States right now, including Ivy League institutions like Harvard, have become hotbeds for Hamas support, not support for the Palestinians. This is Hamas support. In New York City yesterday, and probably today as well, they're probably still lingering around Times Square, we had thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, protesting, marching in support of Hamas. And, I saw some interviews with them on camera, and I always scratched my head about Holocaust denial. How could you deny the reality of the Holocaust? It's all right there, documented for history, the pictures, the eyewitness accounts and stories, the survivors, who I know, some of whom, by the way, with a tattoo on their arm. And yet we have this Holocaust denial factory, the same folks who deny that the Jewish people ever had a presence in Jerusalem, or that a Jewish temple in Jerusalem ever existed. But I always kind of shook my head and said, wow, that's really an understatement of the year here. That's a stretch to deny the Holocaust. But now I see, because what we have right now is Holocaust denial 2.0, in that it's different in that, look, during the first genocide, the last worst genocide the Jewish people experienced before last weekend, the Nazis tried to cover up and hide their crimes. Folks, I know this because I was there at the death camps in Treblinka, Auschwitz, Majdanek, and other death camps. I've been there. I've filmed there. I know the story. I've seen it up close. I've been on the ground in the camps. The Nazis went to great pains to cover up their crimes because they knew if they were ever hauled before an international war crimes tribunal, it would all come out. So they tried to cover it up. And then U.S. GIs, in liberating the death camps, found survivors and saw the demonic horrors of what went down up close. In this case, in 2023, it's been a much different story. Hamas didn't try to hide its crimes. It gleefully broadcast footage of its atrocities around the world on its very own social media accounts. It's not Israel just making accusations with no proof. This is Hamas on TikTok, Telegram, and elsewhere broadcasting their own footage from their own phones and showing the world, yes, we did it, and we're happy about it. We're proud of it. How do you deny that? And yet, clearly, blowback, obviously, and then some after this heinous massacre last weekend. And Hamas leaders now are trying to walk it back a bit and saying, well, it wasn't us. We didn't target civilians. It was some Palestinian civilians who crossed over the border with the fighters. They're the ones who slaughtered the Israeli civilians and burnt families alive and slaughtered babies and toddlers. Very interesting. And yet the footage doesn't lie. It's all right there. And yet also, Israel has uncovered documents that were on the persons of these Hamas terrorists, thankfully, who were killed inside southern Israel before they got a chance to wreak further carnage. And on those documents, the directives from Hamas Central were very clear. These Hamas fighters who invaded southern Israel last weekend were specifically instructed by their Hamas overlords to target children and schools and civilians. Specifically, one Hamas fighter who was interrogated by Israel spilled the beans, so to speak, and shared this as well. We were to target women, children, the elderly. We were to rape the women. Folks, I'm sorry to say that. I know it's kind of graphic, but you need to know. I think you'd rather know, as unpleasant as it is, in these times that we're living, it's no time to mince words. And I think we'd rather know than not know what we're up against. As I said at the top, there are really no gray areas here. You may not like it. I certainly don't. And you may not want to accept it. You may rather want to bury your head in the sand and just wish that it all goes away. But we're in an existential struggle against demonic evil. I can't say it any more plainly than that. And a lot of times people say, man, I wish I lived in Bible times. Well, as my friend Jonathan Kahn says, congratulations, you're in them right now. We're in them. And myself, as a Christian, I feel a duty to step up and shout it from the mountaintops, the truth, and try to inform and educate people as much as I can and support my dear friends in Israel right now. I have many on the front lines right now, dear friends of mine. I was just texting with a good friend. I said, hey, man, how are you doing? He's got a baby. He's got a toddler at home, left his wife, and he's heading to the front lines. And he said, man, I'm good. Our spirits are high, and God is going ahead of us. Yisrael Kai, the people of Israel live. I've never seen Israel so united in all my years visiting Israel, folks. I consider it my second home. I consider Jerusalem my second home. Israel right now, those judicial reform, mass protests, and all that political bickering and disunity is a thing of the past. Israel right now is laser focused. There is righteous anger and outrage. And before I get into Russia and the Israeli operation and the elimination of the Hamas commander who was apparently behind this massacre last weekend, I want to say one quick thing. I read the comments here on the channel, read some comments yesterday saying, you're one-sided, you're totally pro-Israel. What about the Palestinian people? You hate the Palestinian people. Newsflash for you, and this may stun some of the trolls who were saying that yesterday. A Palestinian Christian led me to Jesus, led me to the Lord. That's right. His name's Tas Sada. His book is called Once an Arafat Man. I highly recommend it. Tas didn't even know that he led me to the Lord, but long story short, I interviewed him years back, and afterwards he gave me his book. That book sat on my desk for about 4 months. He said, hey, read my book. And I thought to myself, I just interviewed him for 30 minutes. I heard his whole life story already. What more could I learn in that book? Well, let me tell you, finally, after 4 months, I read that book. By the time I put it down in one weekend, I gave my life to Jesus. And that was a Palestinian Christian who led me indirectly through his writing to Jesus. I was close, and that book sealed the deal, sealed my name in the Lamb's Book of Life. So to say I'm anti-Palestinian is madness. I am anti-Hamas. And I know a great number of Palestinians do not support Hamas and are victims in this. Free Gaza, indeed, from Hamas. And yet, I also know that a great number of Palestinians do support Hamas. That's undeniable, folks. We might not want to talk about this, but that is a fact. And Palestinians in Gaza did indeed vote Hamas into office in 2006. So I'm not blind to that fact either, but I just wanted to get that out of the way. Shout out to Tas Sada. Tas, wherever you are, Once an Arafat Man is the book, and I can quite literally say it changed my life. So I encourage you to check that out right now. But the Hamas commander, Ali Khadi, has been eliminated. I'm going to quote directly from the Times of Israel here, just straight off my phone. And if you are just joining us, we're going live here. Welcome, everyone from around the world. We've got thousands with us, and we'll have many more by the time we're done. Let's see here about Ali Khadi. Here we go. The Israel Defense Forces claim to have killed 2 leading Hamas commanders who helped coordinate last week's attack on Israeli communities near the Gaza Strip. Based on precise IDF intelligence, IDF aircraft killed Ali Khadi, a company commander of the Hamas Nakba commando force, who led the terror attack in Israeli communities near the Gaza Strip last weekend. Now, the sad thing is, Khadi, this terror mastermind who engineered this attack last week, at least on the ground, the ultimate mastermind, folks, of Hamas's military apparatus and operations, by the way, is Mohammed Deif. And Israel, he's very likely, I would say, Israel's most wanted man. But in terms of Ali Khadi, the on-the-ground field commander who was apparently calling the shots last weekend, he was eliminated, and he was in Israeli custody for years. He was released in that massive hostage swap back in 2011 when Israel had soldier Gilad Shalit returned in exchange for about 1,000 Hamas terrorists. Ali Khadi was apparently part of that prisoner exchange. But Ali Khadi is now no more. And as I mentioned at the top, Israeli commandos and special forces teams have been entering Gaza in advance of what the IDF said today will be an invasion by air, sea, and land. We're at the doorstep here. The evacuations, as we get you up to speed on everything, the evacuations continue right now of northern Gaza, where Gaza City is located. And you'll see hundreds of thousands of Palestinians moving southward. Egypt has been reluctant to let them in, to let them cross the Rafah crossing into Egypt. We'll see what happens there. But they are indeed evacuating over the massive threats and protest of Hamas, who, and this gives you an idea of who Hamas is, folks. Wrap your heads around this. Hamas is demanding that Palestinian civilians stay put and not leave in advance of this massive Israeli operation. Now, why would Hamas do that? Real simple. Hamas wants to use these Palestinian civilians, the elderly, men, women, children, who have nothing to do with Hamas, many of them, as human shields. And not only that, when these civilians die, unfortunately, although the IDF goes to great lengths to avoid, extraordinary lengths, to avoid civilian casualties, it's war. Civilians sadly get caught in the crossfire at times. It's horrible. We hate to see it, everyone, but it happens in war. We know that, and we know Israel must do what needs to be done here and crush Hamas once and for all, or more Israeli civilians will die. But Hamas will use images of dead Palestinian civilians and beam them around the world for propaganda value. So for Hamas, civilians, innocent civilians, play a great role in their war strategy. Number one, as human shields, and number two, as propaganda tools. And by the way, thinking back to how much Hamas cares about its own people, that it governs, quote unquote, in Gaza with an iron fist since 2007. Hamas in May 2021, during the last major flare-up between Hamas and Israel, Hamas was firing rockets, as always, out of the Gaza Strip into southern Israel. Well, guess what? Some of those rockets fell not inside Israel, but inside Gaza. They never made it over the border. And when they fell inside Gaza, they killed Palestinian civilians. And Hamas didn't shed many tears about that, needless to say. So the offensive is ready to begin here, folks, any minute. And another interesting point, I talked about the madness on college campuses and around the world, tens of thousands apparently marching in London today as well. But we've been saying throughout the week, keep an eye on this, ladies and gentlemen. The Biden administration, Secretary of State Blinken, President Joe Biden have made all the right comments, remarks this week about the situation in Israel. And so have most Western leaders and even European countries who are knee-jerk, instinctively, usually anti-Israel and condemning Israel in these kinds of engagements and situations. when the rubber hits the road, and the rubber is about to hit the road and then some, it's going to get nasty in Gaza. We all know that. Let's not kid ourselves. And we also know, anyone who's sane and right thinking here, that Hamas must be crushed. After last weekend, there's no doubt deterrence does not work. They must be crushed. They're evil, demonic, just as ISIS was crushed. This organization of barbarous murderers must be crushed. And right now, the world, by and large, or at least in the run-up to today and the run-up to this ground invasion that's coming, the world was on board mostly. And now, what are you going to see in the next few days? And I've said that all along. I applauded the strong comments out of the administration here in the U.S. during the week. And on the other hand, I was condemning and criticizing the embrace of Iran by this administration over the past few years. But check back with me like 4 or 5 days from now, and let's see where this administration is at and where European leaders are at when it comes to Israel's operation in Gaza. Will it be the case? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, by the way. We've got a very lively chat going on right now. Will it be the case that all of a sudden that rock solid support is not there? And it's almost as if what happened on October 7th and 8th last weekend, the carnage, which started this whole thing, is forgotten. I don't think you'd be shocked, sadly. I certainly wouldn't be shocked if that happened. By the way, another update. The Iranian regime, we told you yesterday about Iran's foreign minister, Abdullahian, visiting Iraq and visiting Lebanon. Well, today, and I'm surely not just for a friendly visit to check on the in-laws. He's visiting these countries for a reason, folks. At this time, for a reason. The same reason he was visiting Lebanon, Beirut in particular, in the run-up to this massacre last weekend, planning meetings with leaders from Hamas, with Palestinian Islamic Jihad, with Hezbollah leaders. Abdullahian said today that, again, there could be another front opening. And I said this on yesterday's live stream. It amazes me, the Iranian regime's, I don't even know the word used. I don't want to say boldness because that sounds like almost a compliment. Brazenness. How about that? Where they're saying to the world, the Iranian regime right now, folks, essentially has a gun to the head of the world, Israel in particular, of course. Right now, the Iranian regime is saying it's almost extortion or blackmail writ large, just as with their nuclear program, by the way, where the Iranian officials are saying, if Israel goes any further, there's no telling what we may do. We may just unleash Hezbollah and our other proxies in the region. So basically right now, the world is holding its breath, right? Is Hezbollah going to get involved? That's a big question right now. Everyone's on pins and needles waiting for that second front to open, God forbid. But Iran is the puppet master, the head of the snake in Tehran, pulling the strings here. And ultimately, the decision rests with the supreme leader in Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. It is ultimately his call. Hamas and Hezbollah are not independent actors. It's up to Khamenei. If the supreme leader makes the call, Hezbollah is getting involved. And right now, the whole world is on pins and needles, basically saying, what is Iran going to do? Is Iran going to escalate this thing? Is Iran going to activate ignite its entire ring of fire and drag Hezbollah into this as well? Folks, this is madness that the Iranian regime is not being held accountable for this. They are the puppet master, the head of the snake. Former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett calls them the octopus with their tentacles throughout the region. They're calling the shots here. They have literal war rooms every time there's an engagement against Israel, where you have Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps officials in war rooms with officials from their proxies like Hamas, Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah. The Iranian regime's calling the shots. When and how will they be held accountable? What do you think? I threw out some options yesterday. Sanctions. A lot of people scoffed at serious sanctions that bite. I get it. But folks, those sanctions were working. Those Trump-era sanctions were working. That's undeniable. And the Iranian regime was hurting economically. The people of Iran, who, God bless the people in Iran. I love the Iranian people. The regime is the problem. The Iranian people are the main victims of that regime, just like Palestinians are the main victims of Hamas under that jackboot of terror and tyranny and totalitarianism. Hey, Iran is a Bible land, folks, and I believe it will be once again. Mordecai, Esther, Cyrus, Darius. Think of it. That was ancient Persia. That's modern day Iran. That's a Bible land. And this regime right now is a barbarous, wicked regime. And the Iranian people have risen up against it time and time again over the past 2 decades. And something to encourage you. The fastest growing church in the world right now is the Iranian church. I've reported on this extensively for TBN. Against all odds, against rampant persecution and brutality from the regime, the Iranian church is expanding. It's a largely underground church, no surprise there, because you can't stop the gospel. Many have tried over the centuries. They will never succeed. You can't stop the gospel in China, North Korea, Iran, elsewhere. And that's a fact. Speaking of North Korea, and you're saying, North Korea, what do they have to do with this? Not doing a breakdown of North Korea right now, but I mention it for a reason. I have referred to North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China, those 4 nations, as we look more broadly here, as the ground war is ready to begin. And we don't know if it's going to be a multi-front war. We shall see very soon. I call that the Gathering Storm Coalition. It's a gathering storm against the West, and Israel certainly is in the eye of that storm as well. China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. We see comments, and this is something I think I'll unpack tomorrow. I've been teasing this for the past few days. I apologize, but there's so much to talk about. Russia, right now, Vladimir Putin, yesterday, compared Israel's siege of Gaza to the siege of Leningrad in World War II. He said it's unacceptable. And Russia also is calling for an emergency UN Security Council meeting and resolution. Folks, Russia, hear me closely. Russia is not a friend to Israel. Vladimir Putin is no friend to Israel. If he was, he would not be in bed with the Iranian regime, his close ally, which he has become increasingly reliant on to replenish his arms stockpiles for the war in Ukraine. Vladimir Putin is no friend of Russia. You might say, what are you talking about? There are some 1 million Russian-speaking natives in Israel right now. Yes, I know. And they left Russia for a reason. And you might say, what are you talking about? Benjamin Netanyahu has met with Putin more than any other world leader. He's made various trips to Moscow over the years. Yes, I know. And the reason Bibi has done that was to try and, I don't want to say talk sense into Putin, but to try and talk Putin out. Yeah, talk sense, I guess you would say, to talk him out of his persistent support for Israel's enemies. Ladies and gentlemen, Russian soldiers right now in Syria at Israel's northern doorstep are shoulder to shoulder with Iran and Hezbollah and the Assad regime. These are perhaps, in addition to Hamas, of course, and by the way, Putin has hosted Hamas delegations in Moscow. These are Israel's greatest enemies. He is openly and proudly aligned with Israel's greatest enemies. He's become reliant on the Iranian regime, something I would have never said a few years ago. I would have said, hey, Iran is the junior partner in that relationship. How the tide has changed, where he's relying on those Iranian drones and much more right now. But you can tell a lot about a man by the company he keeps. And the company old Vlad keeps is the Iranian regime, North Korea, Hamas, the Assad regime, Hezbollah, and the Chinese communist regime. Tells you a lot. I say all that to say, watch Russia's reaction in the next few weeks. Watch the reactions of Recep Erdogan, the Turkish tyrant, as well. NATO member nation under Erdogan, I refer to Turkey as NINO, NATO in name only. Watch Erdogan, watch Putin. I believe, as we close here in a minute or so, and thank you for the comments. Great conversation going on here. People aren't foolish. People are wise enough to know that we've entered a new phase here. Most people, unless they're in complete denial, they know we've entered a new phase here. But I believe this phase and what's coming does have prophetic implications, no doubt. I mentioned Turkey and Russia because I believe that the events we see right now could very well be setting the stage for that war of Gog and Magog that's laid out in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 38 and 39. You might say, Gog and who? Gog and what? Funny name, I know, but you need to know it. Grab your Bible. I'm not going to transmit the whole story to you. I assigned you already your homework from Mr. Stacks. Genesis chapter 14, the story of Abraham rescuing Lot, and keep that in your prayers for the hostages. Number 2, the book of Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39. I believe that Russia, I've called it a great betrayal. And I love the Russian people. I have nothing against the people of Russia, but again, it's regimes here. Russia, Iran, Turkey, there's a reason, folks, that they're aligned, those 3 nations, like never before. Traditionally, over the centuries, they've been at each other's throats, and now they've come together. Why in these times? Well, check out Ezekiel 38 and 39. You may get a good indicator of that. And the good news is this latter days, that's what Ezekiel calls it, invasion force that comes against Israel, doesn't get very far. And I don't want to spoil the ending for you, but check it out, Ezekiel 38 and 39. What I'm saying to you is this. None of this that you're seeing right now is by coincidence, with the chess pieces moving on the board, with the reactions from these various players. These reactions are not surprising to me, and they are not a coincidence. The reaction I'm looking at, most of all, is the West. As Israel does what needs to be done, the United States, European nations, do they stand as strongly with Israel as they did at the outset of this war in the immediate aftermath of the carnage? Not only that, something else to watch as we close, the Sunni Arab nations. In effect, folks, the deal that was brewing, it appeared, between Israel and Saudi Arabia seems to be, in the very least, on major hold right now. But the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, Jordan and Egypt, the Sunni Arab nations that Israel does have relations with, that it has peace treaties with, how do they react as this goes on, as this roars on, this war, and perhaps even expands? How do they react? You know who your friends are when things get tough. Everyone's your friend when things are going well, but then when you're down and out or you're having trouble and struggling, you know who your friends are. The one, if they're still by your side, right? The ones who are still with you through your lowest moments. That is a true friend and a true ally. Israel right now is about to learn who its true friends and its true allies are, and if these normalization deals are worth the paper they are written on. I pray that they are. I pray that they are. As for me and my house, number 1, we will serve the Lord, and number 2, we will stand with Israel in these times without hesitation, and we won't mince words, and we're going to give it to you, tell it to you like it is right now. As a follower of Jesus, I strive to be an ambassador for Christ and walk the walk and live out my faith. And I can't think of a better way to live out my faith than to stand with God's land and his people. Hey, thank you so much for joining us here today on the live stream. We will come to you tomorrow on a special Sunday live stream as well. I believe we'll go at 4 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. We will send out an alert. Don't worry, but we're coming to you every single day live as these events unfold right now. Keep it all in prayer. Final word, prayer works. Thanks so much for joining us today. Until tomorrow, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.